Good morning. Welcome to the World Green Infrastructure Congress, and thank you for attending. We have tickets in the high 300s, and people are going to be dribbling in and out all day. As usual, early morning, everyone is late, everyone's a little bit red-eyed, especially me. 6 months ago, we called off holding this Congress because we weren't supported financially to run it. We're a not-for-profit organisation. Now I tend to think of us as a not-for-loss organisation, in that hopefully we can put on events like this which attract international speakers from around the world and our leading national speakers from Australia and New Zealand. Fortunately, Horticulture Australia came through with some money for us, and Business Events Sydney also provided some money, and we dug into our own pockets and put on this Congress. So it's been a bit of an effort over the last 6 months. It's been a lot of work. I'd like to thank all the people involved in that, the event organisers especially, who were given a 4-month lead-in time, the 22 member countries from around the world who are part of the World Green Infrastructure Network, of which we're also a member, and I suppose the affiliated associations that helped as much as they could, and also our media partners like Green Building Council of Australia, Green Tag, ASPEC, and the other ones are eluding me. I did give a official thank you last night, but we really have to move along today. If you're here, I think it's because you care. You care about the planet, and if you're like me, you see one of the solutions for mitigating the impacts of climate change. I'm going to mention that word, climate change, climate change. It's been taken off the agenda in Australia, and I would just like to mention it because it's real. Last year we had our hottest summer ever in 2013. The Bureau of Meteorology said that it was due to climate change. However, we had federal ministers saying that it wasn't. They tend to pick the data that reinforces really what their inaction. So today you will hear speakers, depending why you're here, research from Australia and internationally on water. We have water building management. There'll be case studies. We'll also be having split sessions, so we'll be having sessions in the theatre and concurrent sessions in the other 2 theatres. So there's 3 theatres. There's one out there and one upstairs, and we're using this one as well. We hope you enjoyed the welcome reception last night. Just a few housekeeping notes. Thank you to all the sponsors and exhibitors. In the program booklet, you have the table for all the plenary and concurrent sessions. The girls at the desk will help you if you have any questions. We'd like to remind all speakers to report to the speakers' prep room, located in meeting room 5, which is just behind here in the hallway, prior to your talk, just to upload your presentation and to get a rundown. Reminder to ensure you to stay for our closing plenary on Friday, which we're hosting with drinks and food. Please keep your name tags. If you lose them, just see Rebecca or Andrea at the desk, and make sure you have your mobile phone switched off or on silent. Did I introduce myself? I'm Matthew Dillon. Sorry. Sorry, it's all catching up with me. Doing my best not to have a meltdown. We will be filming the Congress, so that'll be available on our website, Green Roofs Australasia. We also do need your support, so see the girls at the desk if you need any information about joining our organisation. Today we're starting with 3 speakers: Senator Scott Ludlum, Professor Manfred Koehler from Germany, and Raphael Garcia from San Francisco. Firstly, Senator Scott Ludlum, environmental social justice campaigner and political advisor. He was elected in 2007 and again in April 2014 as an Australian Green Senator for Western Australia. He's currently one of 10 Australian Green members of Parliament who's established a track record of positive negotiations with all parties in Parliament. Scott's a spokesperson for the Greens on sustainable cities, housing, broadband, communications and the digital economy, defence and nuclear issues. Personally, I've been very impressed listening to some of Scott's presentations. I've spoken to many politicians over the last 8 years, and Scott is the first politician that I've come across who actually knows what sustainability is in reference to urban development. So with great pleasure, I would like to introduce him to the podium. Thank you. Please give him a warm welcome.
Thanks for a lovely welcome. It feels a tiny little bit awkward putting this presentation to a room full of practitioners and people who do this for a living. I don't come from a planning background, so what I did discover, though, was in the work that we do for sustainability at a political level, which represents much broader and deeper movements within society for sustainability, whether it be social, environmental or economic, is that the place that I went to for optimism and to find where there was actually a bit of a sense of hope was planning and was city policy. Not just policy, but practice and work that people are doing around the world. It was the first time I actually really figured maybe we can make it, maybe we can swing this transition and create the kind of world that's fit to bring children into. So what I'm going to run through really rapidly this morning is just an assembly of work that we've done applying principles of sustainability and green infrastructure to the city of Perth in Western Australia. I want to welcome all of our international guests and people from far-flung parts of the world. You may not have visited Perth before, but what we've tried to do is apply the principles that you use in your everyday work practice at the largest spatial scale that we think is relevant for the time being, because we know how to do sustainability at a household level or an eco-village level, but unless we can apply these theories to very large metropolitan areas, we're probably not going to enjoy the 21st century very much. We had a bit of a lesson this morning about power corrupts and PowerPoint corrupting absolutely, so let's just see if this runs. So using Perth as a case study, I'll just race straight into it. This is an area of the suburban sprawl immediately to the north of the city of Perth on the Swan Coastal Plain. You can see this urban carpet basically rolling out over a period of 10 years and simply obliterating the underlying biosphere. And this is very common on the periphery of large Australian cities, North American cities, but really anywhere that urban expansion is taking place. We shouldn't assume that this growth is a given. Probably you'd be well aware that the population of Detroit fell by 60% between 1950 and 2014, precipitously. And there's now 40,000 buildings scheduled for demolition. So a lot of our work, we discovered, particularly for Perth, which is a very fast-growing city, as all big Australian metropolises are, the implied assumption was just growth forever, growth permanently, plan for doubling within X number of years. And we shouldn't take it as an assumption. Detroit had a very narrow economic base, and it had perilous social inequality fault lines that when they were finally exposed by economic collapse and the flight of wealthy residents out of the inner city, the city of Detroit fell to pieces and filed for bankruptcy not that long ago. So we can't assume growth as a given, and nor should we in Australian cities, where we, again, rest on a perilously narrow economic base and have quite deep social fault lines that it wouldn't take too much to expose. So a quick thought on growth. If we apply the wrong solutions to issues like growth, issues like mass extinction that's unfolding all around us, or the big one, global warming, and thank you for mentioning it, thank you for highlighting it. Climate change is the central issue. Whether or not you see it in all of our work, it's a central organising principle, really, of the work that the Australian Greens do. It underlies a lot of our policy work, a lot of our campaigning. But just imagine, while we're talking about growth, that this orange cube is every tonne of iron ore that the world economy mined, crushed, shipped, smelted in the year 1904. and ask yourself how long it takes before, with commodity markets kind of zigzag around the place, but how long does it take before you get your first doubling of that? And the year is approximately 1929, year of the Wall Street crash, and I think Mother Teresa sets up shop in Calcutta. When is the next doubling of the global iron ore trade? 1955. So Robert Menzies is the Australian Prime Minister, and the gentleman who will eventually invent the World Wide Web protocol is born. The next doubling in our sequence, 1970, the year that they nearly lose Apollo 13. The next doubling, 2006, the year they hang Saddam Hussein. If you look at the annual reports of countries and companies that heavily invested in the iron ore trade, the next doubling is scheduled for around the year 2030. So in 5 doublings, we've undergone a 30-fold expansion. And this premised on a rather harmless sounding 2.8% annual compounding growth. When you hear economists or the Prime Minister get up, probably in just about any of the countries in which we live, and say the economy grew by a healthy 2.8%, not too hot, not too cold, that is premised on the material parts of the economy being twice as aggressive, roughly once every 25 years, and doubling and doubling and doubling and doubling, and obliterating the underlying biosphere, causing enormous social tensions, also dragging millions of people out of poverty. But you cannot simply expect to continue to double at that kind of rate, at that breakneck pace, on a finite planet. And that's one of the reasons that we're in the trouble that we're in. And here's the big one, this pollution trap of climate change, where we have altered the thermal properties of the atmosphere to a degree in which the fingerprints of climate change are now all around us in all parts of the world. So whether we like it or not, as practitioners, as politicians, as activists, as parents, as human beings, we live in the age of limits. Whether we believe it or not, the biosphere actually cares very little for our opinions. This really is the age of limits, and the work that you guys do is a tremendously important part of adapting to living in the age of limits. So, used to, as we are, to a once-through economy, you chop a tree down and catch a fish, you eat it, you create the village, you create culture, you create more children, then you throw the waste on a big midden on the outskirts of the village and it rots. And no harm is done. At that kind of scale, you can get away with that for a long period of time. But what happens if you're doubling and doubling and doubling and doubling to the point where you come to the stage where the biosphere is simply full? And that's where we live at the moment. And any system undergoing that ferocious breakneck runaway growth either hits a depletion trap or a pollution trap. And we live, as the old Chinese proverb goes, in interesting times. So we get both at the same time. So depletion trap, mining fish, hammering fish to the edge of extinction, mining fresh water, mining forests, mining iron ore, or the big one being peak oil, classic examples of depletion traps. And pollution trap, obviously, the big one being global warming and all that portends. So we need an alternate economic model. This isn't just about planning. Planning alone can't do this for us. If we apply piecemeal solutions, we're simply going to be trying to hold back the tide. So rather than the once-through economy, we need to adapt to a model of closed-loop economics, if that makes sense, where all the inputs are renewable, the outputs either biodegrade or are folded back into production cycles. And there is no place for something like a plutonium-burning nuclear reactor in that system. You can't design such a thing into that. There is no place in natural systems for such a thing. If that closed-loop economy seems familiar, it's because obviously it's the organising principle of the biosphere itself. Species that didn't work this out a really long time ago have all wound up in the fossil record. And just because we have the internet and opposable thumbs does not render us immune to natural selection. We are part of this system. And as you can probably imagine, because you work in this space, every part of this closed-loop economy already exists. William Gibson says the future is here, it's just not widely distributed yet. And it's not widely connected. It doesn't have the political clout. But if you can imagine, large-scale renewable energy, bioplastics, sustainable plantation forestry, industrial composting, recycling, every part of the closed-loop economy already exists, but it's too dispersed, and it doesn't really stand a chance yet against the, centuries-long political and economic inertia of the once-through economy, which is why sometimes it feels like what we do is kind of fragmentary. So can you apply closed-loop thinking to a metropolis, to a city of 2, 4, 5, 10, 20 million people? If we can't, we're kind of screwed. We need to be able to apply these principles at these very large industrial scales, and we need to do it with a great sense of urgency. So I was asking, asking ourselves, do we know how to do fossil-free, village-scale, walkable, mixed-use, public transport-oriented cycling communities? And then found this photograph of central Perth in 1899 on the day that the first tram ran. And the fact is, we did zero-carbon cities for thousands of years. It's only very recently that we forgot how to do that. So pinching some of the best stuff from the old heritage cores of industrial cities that were these urban village archipelagos linked together with public transport can be quite instructive. These are the suburbs immediately to the north of Perth. So the blue areas are painted, this is from the Commercial Land Use Survey, very fine-grained, very walkable, cycle-friendly. The blue areas are where you can get a job, buy a cup of coffee, take your kids to childcare, and these areas are dispersed quite finely through the urban fabric. And if you want to know how it got that way, you put back the old tram tracks and the city starts to make a certain kind of sense. All Australian cities had extensive tram networks through the early decades of the 20th century. All except Melbourne ripped them out. There's only one line remaining in Sydney. Perth, Adelaide got rid of theirs entirely. Melbourne now has the largest urban light rail network anywhere in the world. But you can do cities very differently when you orient them along public transport as opposed to just sprawling them over the horizon to meet the needs of the private car. So we adopted a study from a guy called Rob Adams in Melbourne to try and apply this at the largest possible scale. He said, what if you protected all the parks, all the churches, all the urban bushland, all the ovals, the schools, anywhere with high heritage amenity, you protected all of that. But along the tram network, you allowed developers to go up 3 or 4 or 5 stories. So not Shinjuku or Hong Kong, 5 stories maximum, human scale architecture along these transit lines, and you get something that looks a little bit like this, and urban green belts in the middle. And the question that Professor Adams asked his team was, well, what would the yield be? How many more people could we fit into metropolitan Melbourne without cutting down a single tree or knocking over a single area of heritage amenity? The answer that came back just from going along their tram catchment was more than 2 million people. And so you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't go up to 5 stories all the way along, but it was interesting. Nonetheless, that sense of yield without the city sprawling any further, that it could be concentrated and become a transit-oriented city as those cities of the 1890s and early 20th century were. So we applied this methodology to Perth in this project with the developers through the Property Council and the Australian Urban Design Research Centre, AUDRAC. And again, we looked at 7 representative public transport corridors that could conceivably get light rail retrofitted back into them where they used to run, or in some areas new light rail lines. And the yield that we established from turning those 7 corridors into transit-oriented developments was between 94 and 250,000 dwellings. Again, in a city that is already very large, 100 kilometres from end to end, Perth, and one of the most car-dependent cities on the face of the earth. Just taking those 7 corridors buys you a yield of 250,000 dwellings if you go all the way up to 4 or 5 stories. So we got a bit excited about this and thought, well, what happens if you apply that to the entire metropolis? So we started with our heavy rail network, and most industrial cities have a similar land uses, added light rail, added bus rapid transit, and start to create that mesh that people from East Asian cities or European cities will be very familiar with, where public transport can actually be used to go from anywhere to anywhere and be competitive with a private car. In no Australian city, except I guess inner Melbourne, is that really the case. And I guess Sydney on a good day when the trains are running on time. And reminding ourselves that most people don't work in the inner city. The proportions are probably slightly different everywhere, but in Perth, only a quarter of the employment is in the central business district, which is where all the public transport is designed to funnel people in the wealthy white-collar jobs into the central business district and then get them back home again. 75% of the workforce in Perth lives in the works in the light industrial areas or the commercial areas that are dispersed throughout the urban fabric. So creating a really fine-grained anywhere-to-anywhere public transport mesh that's competitive with a private car is really key. We also created an app, bikeblackspot.org, that allows cyclists, when they come across these kind of hilarious practical jokes, kind of the opposite of what you get in Copenhagen or Amsterdam, where people are just thrown into uncontrolled intersections, or, good luck. Very, very best of luck, cyclist. So we created this app that actually allows people to map that, and we've had quite a bit of success around the country of black spots being reported, because it sends the photograph and your snarky comment to the minister, and it also pins them to a Google map, so you can gradually see a sort of crowdsourced map of where cycling infrastructure is most needed. And for 3% of our state transport budget, we could have Copenhagen-style cycling infrastructure in Perth. So we started layering up the different things. Once you consolidate urban growth along these transit corridors, keeping in mind that all of those 250,000 new dwellings, if you maxed it out, are along public transport, you can start to protect the underlying, the sort of remnants of urban bushland in the underlying biosphere that is going to cop such a hammering from climate change. So we worked with the WA Local Government Association who developed this amazing greenways map of rebuilding the linkages, the ecological linkages on the Swan Coastal Plain, relinking the wetlands such as those remain, and working out how to kind of re-establish linkages for the pollinators to follow as the climate changes, apart from anything else. Again, relatively tiny amounts of money compared to what it costs. You know, they're proposing to spend $1 billion on an urban freeway, which is only 5 kilometres long. What you end up with, and this was one of the key things that we were working with, this is the mean density on the edge of Perth is R15, 15 dwellings per hectare. We basically established, and this would be fairly familiar to anybody at all with any kind of planning background, that if you take it up to R160, every hectare that you do that to, you effectively preserve 16 hectares. You can preserve 16 hectares for peri-urban agriculture or for bushland restoration or protection. So what it effectively comes to, and this is just a small representative sample of outer suburban Perth, nowhere in particular, but somewhere that probably be familiar to many people in the room, and kind of x-ray it and just remind ourselves that cities survive on this invisible, forgotten mesh of infrastructure. People only remember that all these pipes and ducts are there when they fail. And traditionally in industrial cities, it's extensive, and your water and your electricity and everything's brought to you from a very long way away. And the kind of architecture that many of you folk practice internalises those ecosystem services and those flows rather than dragging them in from way over the horizon. So we start with a catchment that's basically 1 kilometre in diameter that has nearly 500 dwellings and only about 170 jobs. Very high site costs to plug these developments in from the periphery. And then basically modelling just on national average figures, so nothing too specific, but orders of magnitude, the CO2 emissions of that catchment, the fact that it grows almost none of its own local food, and that cars are predominant, you have to drive whether you're a greenie or not. And then imagine that you've sort of reconsolidated one of these urban villages. So this is now along one of these strategic tram corridors, if you like. That the site costs per dwelling are much less than half. We've nearly doubled the resident population, and we've created the ability for a lot more employment and much more diverse employment within that catchment. And then gradually just fill things in. This is my crude interpretation of what you folk do. So the green roofs, the green walls, the urban gardens, start growing a little bit more of your own local food in the catchment, and then plug in the cycling networks and the public transport mesh. By the end of this little thumbnail sketch, although you've nearly doubled the resident population, greenhouse gas emissions are actually quite a lot lower. Local food's being grown here. You can walk to work, or you can cycle to work, or you can take public transport to work. So you've created a much more resilient and much less car-dependent little community. And again, not by going up hundreds and hundreds of stories and creating some sort of Blade Runner thing, but just these mixed-use corridors that'll be familiar to people from all over the world, but are actually relatively rare in large Australian cities, and kind of take urbanism out to the suburbs rather than just expecting people to survive in the age of peak oil, come what may. Just very briefly, the big one, again, being energy. The biggest loop that we could close in our closed loop ecology would be energy. If we get this wrong, then most of the rest of the work that we do will really be for nothing. It is absolutely essential. So our Energy 2029 project is that sort of energy layer. Yes, it uses traditional cheap renewable energy such as wind, but also there's 3 of these units being dropped into the ocean off Garden Island to service a naval base. These units just basically pump very high pressure water ashore. You can either use it as a desalinator or an electricity generator. And these, for anybody who's spent time in the south of Spain, this is a plant in the deserts, high desert of Nevada, solar concentrator plant. So it's effectively a gargantuan magnifying glass, 1.5 miles across, that beams sunlight onto that black central receiving tower and heats a molten salt solution up to 550 degrees and then stores it in one of these tanks at the base. And so you can run a plant like that flat out, 24/7, or in this case 10 hours of storage without any sunlight at all. Obviously it's a huge employer. They've discovered in Nevada a lot of metalworking, local fabrication, rather than importing a wind turbine from Denmark, sticking it in the ground and then walking away. Very, very high employment, skilled and semi-skilled. So these things really are a game changer. If you can imagine, cities are going to start to embed a lot more of their energy, but I think you're still going to need large utility scale clean energy plants. And using these models, we had some consultants derive some scenarios for us that showed that it's the same as or cheaper to transition to the year 2029 to 100% renewable economy, because of course by the end of that period of time, although the capital is expensive to install, you've eliminated your fuel bill, you're off the fossil treadmill, you've not only closed that ecological loop, you've eliminated it. You're no longer addicted to coal and gas. So just to finish up, and I won't read this, I'm presuming you can read this right up the back. Machiavelli wrote The Prince 501 years ago this year. How fresh is that? Does that not read like it could have been written yesterday? So I'm not in the planning game so much. What I've just showed you is a really rapid traverse over stuff that we've shamelessly plagiarised from some of the best people in the business here in Australia. But our role is in advocacy. And so I hope you'll use us. I hope you'll, our door is open for people working here who want to get these kind of large-scale projects up. This is why the Greens show up to work every day, is to help you guys do the kind of work that we urgently need you to do and get up at scale as rapidly as possible. And this is just my summary, I guess, because it sometimes might feel that these things that we do, these interventions or these changes that we make in our own lives are inconsequential when we consider them ourselves. But at the point at which we can roll these techniques over cities of 2 to 10 million people, every time you hop on a bicycle, minutely, you reduce the necessity for the US 7th Fleet to be stationed in the Persian Gulf. And when we start acting collectively in that way, I think we really can change the world. Thanks very much for being here.
Thank you, Scott. Can we have that man cloned and put him into government, and then we can have a government full of people like that across the planet? Maybe then we would get somewhere. As a species, we have actually impacted on the climate, and we're impacting on other species on this planet. And I think that's why I was mentioning climate change before, because it's a point that's just not made strongly enough. The next speaker is Professor Manfred Koehler. Manfred has been involved in green roofs and green infrastructure since the 80s specifically. He worked on the FLL guidelines. He's the president of the World Green Infrastructure Network. He's tireless in his advocacy. He's a senior lecturer and head of landscape architecture at the University of New Brandenburg. And it gives me a great honor to introduce you to Manfred. Thank you, Manfred.
Thank you, Matt, for the nice welcome words. Matt gave me the title to make a short presentation about the development of the green industry from Germany to global. This is not completely right. Everywhere in the world was some nucleus to do something with green roofs, and other technology, but I'm only able to give a small information how we have dealt in Germany with these ideas for a time and why we start with these things for a time. And the short agenda for this morning speech means I can take you with me to the starting point in Germany. This was in the early time of industrialization and a special type of buildings, and there was also some engaged unique person who had some ideas, of course. In each time are persons with good ideas, and these ideas must be spread out and must become to the majority. And we need these idealistic persons, and we need technicians who figure out the technology that all normal architects can follow these ideas finally. And this is the point. Some bodies are too early and some are too late, and at the right time, and to come to a group which are able to go ahead. And this is, I will give some words about the starting points. And this was in Germany after the World War II. There was a real big movement about the greening under the aspect nature back to cities. Then we have structured guideline group and a promotion group, and some ideas how it works over the last years, and some specific pictures from projects in this room here. That means the beginning, this is a person called Eduard Rüber. There was a few more, but there's a remaining book available in some special stores from 1860. And he had the idea that he make a cover on the building on this very typical types of rental barracks where the people live very in a cheap way, and they have a risk of fire. The oven, the heating systems means the house can burn very quickly. And he said, put a little bit sand on the roof and you reduce the fire risk. Very simple idea. Here's also the very simple idea. Make a little bit more of this soil and you can make a garden on top. And it's a small booklet is very interesting. They have ideas for roof gardens in Munich, for example, in many cities are starting some of these. And this idea works so long as the steel construction will become very fashionable and normal, and then another technology starts. But he constructed a lot with wood, and some of these roofs remained until today. So we can say how this first ideas of green roofs works without any guidelines in the background. He trial and error finally. Yeah, and later, of course, a lot of academic works came on, so you can read at the moment not only some PhD from some universities, you can also find in Scopus Direct, Science Direct, all these peer-reviewed journals, more than 1,000 academic paper, that the knowledge is really broad, but bring it to a point. This is at the moment the question. So our starting point, finally, after World War II, you know, there was a little bit to do with new housing and a question. As I was a student in Berlin, for example, yeah, the houses looks like this little bit, they need a little bit updating, finally. And the backyards was not nicely green and very much divided. And in this field, the idea started to bring back nature and plants in this region, and finally to uplift this rooftop area to bring some apartments inside. Now everybody knows that the top level buildings and have the nicest apartments, the nicest view. But at that time, in the 1980s, a lot of people set up in nearly all the German cities program to give an incentive to start something to do in the backyards. It's quite easy, a little bit material, and in cooperation with the neighborhood to make these reality green. And backyards was easy, facades was also done by the citizens, and the rooftop was handed over to companies finally. Because it was a little bit more dangerous to do something. And the first key thinker in our country, for example, came in the 1980s to say, we make integrative studies. The old blocks structure should be integrated in concepts with greenery, with transportation system. You see the very more modern type of bicycles could be there. There could be a little bit urban farming on the top. There could be some photovoltaic somewhere. And here inside there was an office. There was later a big company selling photovoltaic cells. The other was an architectural workshop who tried to make concepts. And this was the first before we had a Ministry of Environmental Questions. So this was the really beginning. It was the Ministry of Interior which supported this. And since that time, the program started nearly in all the cities. And finally, we need persons who are very visionary, say what is possible. Mr. Hundertwasser was in the 1980s our pushing point, this international building exhibition, and he said, let's do something, not white angel, make it green. and in the connection with landscaper to make it in reality the details. This was really the problem, to get a solution which works finally. But we need artists, and this was the point for us. It helps very much to bring greenery into cities, and the combination with the green roof areas, for example, here, to make there an apartment was open space. The other discussion was you can build outside on the farmland, or you rise up the house 1 or 2 stories. So now it's very normal this, but this was in the 80s one of the driving points. And the other point is cooperation. If you work together with people, say there are contractors, there are scientists, a few scientists, and some producer, and make together guidelines how to figure it out, then it becomes a level of a standard. And FLL is a group in Germany, has now about 50 of these standards. This was on the current situation on the trade show in Nuremberg in September. So they have to offer and sell a lot of guidelines. And this is formally the structure which helps our government to say this is the type of norm and guidelines. If you build a green roof, something, you have to follow this. So these groups started in 1975. And since 1978, there's a guideline for the green roof structure. We have now about 50 different guidelines for several questions how to plant a tree in this way. And this was the point to select the guidelines work from the different types of promoting, like the FPV, the German group, is the promoting group, being together with all these contractors and say, yeah, green is good, and to promote and explain it to people. This is Gunter Mann, our president at the FBB. And we have a lot of congresses, and the connection with the World Green Infrastructure Network is finally done. So the question to other European countries is that in the first time they try to translate only the guidelines we produce in our country, but it's not a translation question, it's a question of adaptation. You have other styles, other climate, and so on. And at the moment we have the situation that we are working on the level of European standards to have something from North Scandinavia to Mediterranean, but it's a little bit tricky to have the same. It must be adapted in a good shape. And yeah, to bring the information on the larger scale is that what we are doing now and here, and this connection is fine to see something. And if you're sitting in the FLA, this is very curious, you're sitting and discussing about these guidelines, and you're looking from the window of this nice FLA, you see such a roof, sitting a long time with a workshop and thinking, okay, also in Germany we have a lot of green roofs, but the view from the windows see, and each building in each street, a lot of things are to do. Also in our climate, they install these decentralized air conditioning system. They are the worst, the lowest energy efficient system you can imagine. They have, of course, a little bit cooling inside, but you warm up the city. Also in our climate. And you can see this could be both very fantastic with the greenery. It's not too high, not too difficult, but a lot of potential. Yeah? So we have to do also. The Germans are not the best in this field. They have to do more. The current situation means we have about 10 million square meters a year, and this divided in 50% of roof gardens and 85 extensive. And in the field of the extensive, there's the potential what we can do better at the moment to more biodiversity, not only sedum roofs and more microscale inside. So this is the point where we have a lot more to do, because a lot of these roofs are now come by regulation. They have to do this, but there's no control system that we have a monitoring after 5 or 10 years. We're working on this, that we make a monitoring that we say after 5 years or 10 years, you have to enhance your green roof to make something better. And the last success in our country finally is 2014, this year. The green roof is accepted as energy saver. That means if you get a credit for investment in your building and you make a green roof, you get a lower rate for your, what is this, debits? For the financial things, yeah. So it's accepted. Long time they say, oh, green roof is not for energy saving. This is now accepted. This is a very good pushing point for our industry. Yes, and discussing what is possible with greenery, finally a small collection of pictures how the buildings look like. This means a very old historic building in our country from about 500 years old, fantastic buildings. If you want to do here something, it's a little bit tricky. This is a full material wall. You can do something with climbers, but not too much. The best thing is a full brick facade with a plaster on it. So here like a fruit spalier system. If you have buildings from the 1960s, it's a little bit difficult. There's special houses with energy saving and some special surfaces. There we have to work on it. And finally, the discussion about very new types of buildings with this, what is an ETFE surface, where we must do something like interior greenery. So finally, the green roof structure means we have roofs, we have facade, we have indoor greening, and find the right solution for architectural perspective. And this is a work from Nicole Foser in the last years. She set up a general structure, how to bring in the vegetation, and this is a point now we're discussing and make guidelines on this. And one example of my own research means if you look for the facade greening, we have different types to install vegetation. This means the gabion style, very heavy structure on the one hand. Then we have small boxes like this, or we have modular system, put it on the wall. Now we start with the vocabulary, what kind of definition we have for the different types. The German first makes a definition and then do more. And the Patrick Blanc style is more or less this here. And my test was in our climate, we have the frost, the winter time. This is a challenging thing. This was a number of professional system here in the test to say we can see what they deliver as plants and what survived over a time. That means after a few years of frost, the green one are the surviving plants. Yeah. So some of the system here, this boxes system was fantastic. No plant died in the winter time. But the other time, they have some losses. 1/3 of replantings may be normal at the moment, but this is finally to explain to clients if they say they have to invest, and we have to invest also in the future years. The interesting point at the moment in our country is to go ahead to bring numbers in a connection. This is a running project. Perhaps on Friday, 11 o'clock, I can talk more about this. This is called Concepts of Urban Water Management and Sewer Systems. This is a project on the example of Berlin with a lot of fundings inside, a lot of partners to say, now we have a lot of measurement on the buildings and can do in the particular size of a building. But the question is, what happens with the normal sewer system here? The sewer people at the moment say, we need your water to flush our systems. The rainwater people say, we can make the zero runoff property, but the people of the sewer system say, we need your water. The same with the people who sell the drinking water. Say, okay, we have a drinking water pipe system, and it doesn't matter for the pipe if it's run much or less. Please use this. The Germans are happy to save drinking water from 150 liters for a few years, now by 50 or 80 liters per day, and this is not good for the tube systems. So it's great to have a project to have the connection between all these questions finally in a very serious financed framework, and to give guidelines for the city of Berlin. We have a neighborhood of 300,000 people to make 6 examples. Yeah? It's great to get these numbers. And the big nice thing at the moment in the level of Europe is that our European administration had understand that the word ecosystem services is just now the driving point. Finally, last year in Nantes, in the conference, we had some participants from the ministry there, and say what we are dealing is here a number of technology, green roof, green facades, indoor greening, and backyard and front yard greening. And on the other side, we offer a lot of energy service here, ecosystem services, and in this field, a lot of things are possible. The European community is now on the level to say this will be funded by research, and also to set up programs for the cities that they can apply for doing such in detail, to execute this for cities. And okay, Matt asked for a few examples. What is the current situation? I would say this is a nice project realized in the last years. The Adlershof project in Berlin, where a full new neighborhood is realized as eco-friendly. That means each of these buildings is a unique construction. Here is the Solon company with the photovoltaic cells. Each of these buildings has to make green roofs, has to have a concept for rainwater management. If they are not working with such environmental friendly technologies, they have to explain. This was one argument in the architectural discussion. And this project more or less is finished. This was an old airfield. Some of the old runways in the middle is open like a nature conservation area. There's now some cattle and so, and some bird breeding areas. And this is the industrial zone, and here is developed a new type of neighborhood for residential housing. A good project with a lot of information. We was involved with the physics buildings. This is one of these here inside to make measurements on the living wall boxes on the house between 2002 and 2010. And this was handed over to the university to deal with this. The full project was one model project of the Berlin Senate. Finally, yeah, this is the block inside with the research. Now it's maintained by the university. This was a climber, Wisteria sinensis, grow well here in Australia, but we have 5 different backyards with different plants, so a lot of things are inside. And giving some few pictures of other projects at the moment. This means last year in Hamburg there was the International Garden Exhibition, a sport area with some installation, and they got this type of gabions on the walls to see how they grow and how they work. This very heavy construction, so they have only a few installed. And the problem with the frost, it was very cold and harsh winter at that time until, yeah, the coldest day was in March with minus 15 degrees, and is for young plantings also on the ground level a problem. So the plants recovered later. In summer it looks perfect, but in the time when the garden exhibition was opened, this was not an amazing view finally. Yeah? But this is nature and gardening. Yeah? This is another example we saw last year, the small boxes system in France. It's grow well, and it's one solution how it's possible. Here, this is another system with a modular wall construction done by some colleagues and some from Rotterdam at Warsaw at the moment, or a fully covered, seamless situation. That is what architects at the moment wish. And the companies will deal with some solution on this. It's possible. We have more the smaller scale, the level of 1-2 stories at the moment, or at the school, 2 school examples with these modular system as boxes here, or another thing is here to integrate in the facade. The point for us is to discuss if you remove the nice and expensive outside stone facade and take plants in this, you can say you substitute the cost of these, but it must be well insulated. The gap between the wall and here, this is the point where the energy can be lost finally. So it's a very important point. The research at the moment, what I like to see is that we compare climbers, the normal shading system, and the vegetation shading and the climber system. And only an example, if you have something like this, the investment costs are very low. The investment costs of such shading system are a little bit higher. And if you have such structures, the costs are very in variation. We have not a point in the middle of if you compare all the systems. And you have the running costs of these systems. So finally, this type of shading system has the lowest maintenance cost over the years. And if you have a technical thing like this at our university, you see this is very electronic, and this goes with the sun, and this goes with the own mind, not like the people like, you must steer. So the cost of the climbers for such shading system is it's the lowest, and the running cost of these living walls are quite high. This is at the moment the discussion in our country to say what are the life cycle costs of all these installations. The life cycle costs and the risk of fire are the point we have to deal in the FLL to spread out the facade technology. Yeah, some other projects at the moment, see the small list of things, what is running in Berlin, for example. Starting sometimes with the sewer system in the backyard, it's monitored very fine, and we can reduce the water cost of such project, so the investment is nearly reduce the running cost for the apartments. This is great to see this. And this is an early type of eco-housing with a lot of monitoring. So there is a lot to see and get the numbers of these for the longer time. It's not only the investment, you must see what is in the life cycle of the building, finally the thing. And on the block age, we have monitoring since the 1980s. So a lot of information. This was the pioneers in this urban ecology. This is a little bigger situation, a project or something. This was a winner in Germany, for example, in the last years, roof gardens somewhere. This is also a nice project, win also a prize, and the combination, like here in Australia, to see an integrated roof garden and integration of facade greening with boxes on a car park here. It is monitored very fine with an interesting system. And to discuss with so-called normal architects, what is the point at the moment? Also, we have in a lot of cities small development boom or so. That means this was the typical houses, and there are some small spots open for new construction, and discuss what is possible if we make a nice construction for these 1, 2, 3, 4-story houses in developments. Our people like this style of buildings. And finally, to see a nice project to have people, like this is a project in Berlin. This looks a little bit like the Highline project. So people are amazed to walk near the metro station zoo and have a look into the Tiergarten, the zoo area. Yeah, so this is at last the final project, opened in April. And yeah, the people are happy about greenery in the city. And finally, it's not a work of a few persons, but it's good to learn from local example everywhere in the world. And seeing yesterday the nice examples here is great. And we need people who are the artists and bringing the idea forward. I think it's good to have some nice people in the team. Yeah, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Manfred. The point I'd like to make is that all the speakers are available. Our job is to put you all in the same room, and it's your job to actually track down anyone you'd like to speak to, talk to everyone. This is a hub, and this is an introduction to the knowledge network around the planet. There are people from all across the globe. Reach out. The next speaker is Raphael Garcia. I first met Raphael when he was with Rana Creek. He just finished the Academy of Sciences building in San Francisco. He's now project manager at San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. And I've always thought of him as the charming green encyclopedia. He's an amazing person and a wealth of knowledge. Please give a warm welcome to Raphael Garcia from San Francisco.
All right, can you hear me? Great. So my name is Raphael Garcia. It's worth noting that a lot of what I'm going to present is the work of around 400 people. So we have a huge program, a lot of dedicated staff who have been trained around the world and have a lot of experience through people probably in this room as well. So this is not just me. So What I'm here to discuss, if I could make sure this works, is the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission to explain who we are, our combined sewer system, our $6.9 billion sewer system improvement program, and then the overview of our green infrastructure projects, the early implementation projects. So San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, SFPUC, manages the potable water, municipal power, and the sewer system for the city of San Francisco. So we are the 500-pound gorilla in the city. We're the ones who have the resources to make things happen. There's a lot of different departments, but we're the big heavy hitters. We have a really wonderful new headquarters that's now 2 years old, which is a LEED Platinum building, which is called 525 Golden Gate, which I'll be speaking about in a couple days. That has a whole on-site gray water, black water reuse system, solar power, wind power, passive lighting. So it's a really great facility, so we're trying to walk the walk. We also have a very large system that needs upgrading right now. So the whole system, if you look down the middle, has there's a ridge that divides the city. So everything that is to the right of this ridge is called the bay side of the city and drains towards the bay. Everything to the west drains over to the Pacific Ocean, and those lines delineate our 8 urban watersheds. So it's worth noting that we think of things in 2 different frameworks. One is where does the flow go? So it's either the Oceanside treatment plant or Southeast treatment plant or North Point. But then we're also looking at it from an urban watershed perspective. So there's the urban fabric on top, but which way does the surface water go? And in the undeveloped areas, where does water go? So we have a combined sewer system, which means all of the runoff from a roof or the streets gets combined with the same flows that goes from your toilet or shower or dishwasher. And all those go into these combined systems, which then, if we have a large storm, overflows into the ocean, but normally it goes to the treatment plants. And with sea level rise, we also have 7 times a year on average seawater coming into our system. So for some people debating climate change and sea level rise, it's a reality for us right now. So it's worth noting that this is the only, well, one of very few combined sewer systems in the whole West Coast. The only other systems like this are in New York, DC, a lot of East Coast cities. Why? Because this is one of the oldest cities in America. So our challenges as a utility are looking at our aging collection system. A lot of our sewer lines are brick sewer. They were built around the time of the American Civil War in the mid-1800s. We have excess stormwater flows, which is a nice way to say flooding. We have future regulatory requirements. We're considered in the US the A students sitting in the front of the classroom, the nerds, who are trying to always do better. And so it's worth noting this is the only major program in the US that is not under a consent decree, meaning there's no legal requirement for us to do this. Every other program you see, there's some federal regulation sitting on their back saying you have to do this within a certain time frame. Seismic concerns, as you guys are well aware, in Christchurch there's a large catastrophe of an earthquake that damaged much of the city and the rebuilding still. City of San Francisco has taken that to heart, looked at how many similarities we have with a lot of other cities have felt these damages, so we're trying to be proactive in upgrading our facilities for earthquakes. Operational optimizations. Part of sustainability is minimizing how much pumping goes on. We're trying to make the city as much gravity flow as possible. And then, as I was saying before, sea level rise, climate change. This is something that currently the whole Bay Area is debating of how we can pool our resources to try to take on this challenge communally. But right now, it's mostly the public utilities that are talking because we have our treatment plants at the lowest spot of the cities on purpose. And then this is our levels of service for the San Francisco Public Utilities wastewater enterprise. This is what we're legally required to provide to the ratepayers. So this is something that is interesting because it's been some recent changes to it. Provide compliant, reliable, resilient, and flexible system that responds to catastrophic events. So this is saying any catastrophic event, whether it's sea level rise or huge storm. Integrate green and gray infrastructure to manage stormwater. This is actually after much debate. City of San Francisco is perceived as one of the most progressive cities in the world, but people, because of how diverse we are, people hardly ever agree. If you asked everyone, are puppies cute? You would not have consensus. You know, do you like bicycles? People will not have consensus. Sunshine. But green infrastructure, people seem to agree. So it's actually something where if you want to see redevelopment, if you want to see new streetscape projects, people want to see more green in there. Provide benefits to impacted communities. We actually have a lot of communities that are on the low end of the economic tiers. For us, the poverty levels, it just changed from 60,000 to 75,000. So that means if you make $75,000 a year, you're poor in San Francisco. That's how expensive it's gotten. It's because the tech industry moving in has completely changed the landscape of the city. And doing so has meant that with change, people are being pushed out. So a lot of what we're trying to do is do redevelopment while keeping the historic communities in place. Modify the system to adapt to climate change. It's in our level service now. So it's something, like I was saying before, is being debated by some Republicans in America, but it's beyond debate for us. So we're really trying to figure out how to pay for it, how to plan for it over time, and how far to plan out. Achieve economic and environmental sustainability. A lot of times people think of sustainability as some new structure, some new item, but really what we're trying to do is marry in economic sustainability with water and energy needs. So it's something that has to be economically sustainable from both a capital standpoint and maintenance standpoint. And then maintain ratepayer affordability. Ultimately, this is all paid for by the water and sewer bill. And it's spread across to everyone. And so this is why we've done a huge amount of public outreach to make sure everyone is aware of how these projects are being funded. So this is our motto for SSIP, the Sewer System Improvement Program, is gray, green, clean. So we're going to have a combination of both gray infrastructure. Some of the large projects I'm not going to talk about is like a $1.2 billion 10-meter diameter tunnel that runs across half the city. Others are creek daylighting, which you'll hear about, and a bunch of really wonderful green infrastructure. And ultimately, the goal is to make the city more livable and keep the environment healthy. And this has actually been a huge, important part for San Franciscans, as it's not just about their specific neighborhood, but the whole community at large and the world. So this is the budget for the Sewer System Improvement Program. If you want to see a green roof or a green street go in, this is where it happens. So I used to be a designer for green roofs and green technology. Now I'm a bureaucrat. And this is where the decisions are made about what gets built. You have to have a little line item in there saying, this is specifically for green infrastructure, and make sure no one touches the money. Which is harder than you think. So treatment plants, we have our old treatment plant in Southeast was built in 1954, and it's crumbling. And it's something that we're prioritizing right now, so it's over $2 billion. It's a lot of money, but we're also helping to treat the flows from over 80% of the city with this one treatment plant. It's, I'm sorry for the imperial system, I'll just say that right now. It's over 2 billion gallons of wastewater a year that we're trying to manage through this. And we're trying to use some of the most efficient, latest technology that is revolutionizing how we're treating wastewater. The collection system means all of the sewer pipes that ends up at the treatment plants. We're spending $400 million, and specifically we're looking to spend that $400 million on green infrastructure and $12 million on gray. So we're really fighting for as much green improvements as possible, and the $12 million for rehab of some of the larger sewers. And then we have a huge amount of consultants. So if you see $125 million, that goes to experts from around the world who help us to design and plan and implement these projects and set new policies for the city. And then land acquisition, City of San Francisco has gotten crazy expensive. So $128 million for land purchase does not get you very much these days. So yeah, I'll just leave it at that. So basically we're looking at a $6.9 billion program over 3 phases. And so what I'm going to talk to you about is green infrastructure that's being implemented as part of phase 1. So urban watershed assessment is our citywide planning process. One of the things we've noticed is a lot of people have pet projects. A lot of people are like, wow, this politician really loves this project and this neighborhood, and a lot of constituents want to see this. And so we had a lot of knee-jerk reactions of where we're putting in our projects. And what we saw is like, wait a minute. We want to think holistically of what the needs are of the city. And beyond just hydrology, we want to look at where the needs are for the community. We want to look at where the needs are for the environment, for habitat, for cyclists, for transportation in general. So we took a step out of our PUC hat for utilities and just looked at what are the needs of the city and looked at where we can implement both projects and programs and policies to have a more livable city and have interdepartmental agreements to have shared projects, to have better projects, and have minimization of construction impacts on the public. So one of the things worth noting is we've had a huge amount of public outreach, and we've actually determined what the needs are from the public by the public telling us what they perceive as the needs. So we've had a lot of online interactive surveys. A lot of people can't make it to our outreach meetings, but they are on their mobiles, they're on their laptops. And so we've used MetroQuest to be an online interactive survey, and we created maps that really help people to really see in a different scale of what the different concerns are from a public safety standpoint, from a flooding standpoint, from economic disparity standpoint. So we did the watershed characterization, develop project alternatives, evaluate the alternatives, recommend an implementation strategy, and then there's the final recommended projects. So for the $400 million, that's actually a drop in the bucket. It's not going to meet all the needs of the city, and we realize that, but it's important to prioritize. So one of the things we're trying to do is update this over time so that we can see as the decades pass and the city changes, what are the most applicable projects and policies. So here's an example of a map. This is Channel Watershed. This is actually downtown San Francisco. I'm sure you all recognize this blob. No, I'm kidding. But this doesn't look like much in this context, but it's to say that we have huge amounts of large-scale maps all overlaid to try to give people a different sense of where flooding happens on streets, where flooding enters into buildings, where there's pedestrian and car accidents, where there's a narrow sidewalk and a need for a widened sidewalk, where there's a potential for green roofs on new public facilities or gathering spaces. So we created all these different layers, all these opportunities, and ultimately we came up with this suite of types of projects: conveyance, storage, outfall improvements, operational, streetscape, creek daylighting, and parcel. And the parcel is what a lot of you guys are focused on, which is the green roofs and the green facades. But those also have to marry into streetscapes as well, and public spaces, plazas, and such. And then the potential programs we're working on right now is a sustainable roof program. And the reason why we say sustainable roof is it's both green roofs and blue roofs. Blue roofs just meaning storage of stormwater on the roof temporarily. Watershed improvement grants. California has a huge amount of grants, and San Francisco is actually notorious for grabbing up almost all of the state and federal funding. We are very proactive and diligent. We sharpen our pencils, and so we've received over 80% of the grants in the state, and so they've boxed us out of a lot of funding. They're trying to spread the wealth to other cities not as progressive. So we're trying to work on watershed improvement grants where we're borrowing money and then lending it out to help people make it more affordable. And then residential stormwater programs of teaching people how to implement stormwater management on properties such as rain barrels and rain gardens on their properties. All right, so this is a quick map of the EIPs, the early implementation projects. Now, I'm sorry, by the way, we have so many acronyms where I'm from. It's just alphabet soup constantly. So please stop me if I babble in acronyms. But we have 8 urban watersheds, and we very purposely, to keep the politicians at bay, we have 1 green infrastructure project per urban watershed. This is not the way the political district lines are divided in there. And so we wanted to look at 1 different type of technology for each of the types of topography, urban conditions, soil conditions. There's a lot of different things we're trying to do to monitor these, because this is what we call performance-based green infrastructure. So this is not a green tax. This is not, oh, let's make the city greener because it's pretty. This is, okay, this is performance-based. We're going to build this. You're going to get something for it. This is going to infiltrate stormwater, reduce the risk of combined sewer discharges, reduce the risk of flooding. This is going to help reduce the burden on your 120-year-old sewers. So this is what the objectives are of these green infrastructure projects, is to demonstrate and evaluate the performance, inform the performance and design standards. So we're trying to standardize it to streamline the process. And we're trying to do a lot of post-construction monitoring. So this is going to be critical to us getting future funding in the future phases. And then, of course, while we're out there, we're trying to educate the public and involve them as much as possible and try to teach people how to do this in their own homes or schools. And then neighborhood beautification and greening. It's always entertaining trying to get people to agree of what their streetscape should look like. A lot of San Franciscans don't have front yards. So for all intents and purposes, this is their front yard. And then traffic calming, pedestrian safety. As much as that sounds wonderful and easy to do, that's probably one of the harder points because it's a bit of a predatory relationship. Cars eat bikes and people, and the bikes eat pedestrians, and the pedestrians are trying to scurry around, avoiding everyone. So there's not a lot of love between pedestrians and cyclists and cars. So trying to agree on if we should remove parking so that we can make the sidewalk more walkable. Should we have a dedicated bike lane? How do we get cyclists to stop at intersections? It's been interesting. Habitat creation, this is actually something where we've had a lot of success, although sort of say under our breath, this is going to bring lots of birds and butterflies, and try to avoid, hey, there might be raccoons and possums and rats and unwanted uses as well. But actually we've had a lot of success, and we actually have a very specific habitat plan that we work with city planning on is called Green Connections, to try to create a whole citywide network of walkable, bikeable streets that are specifically slated for habitat, given our different microclimates. And then interagency synergies is huge. That the cost sharing is where you really make it happen at the end of the day. This is how our phases work. There's no need to belabor this, but everyone has different terminology. So basically we have planning, design, and construction. But within design we have needs, alternatives analysis, conceptual engineering reports. One of the things that's going to be important to see with these projects is what problem are you trying to solve. If you ask most engineers, how do you solve a traffic problem? You get a freeway. How do you store water? You get a dam. A lot of what we're trying to do is get civil engineers to think differently and try to work collaboratively with landscape architects. A lot of folks in the city are very siloed, and this is my territory and stay away. So really what we're trying to do is get people to show up at the table together and work more collaboratively. All right, so this is Mission Valencia Green Gateway, which is in the Islas Creek watershed. So this is along Valencia Street in between Mission and Cesar Chavez. So this is a major area that's being redeveloped. That large facility right next to it is St. Luke's Hospital. And Sutter Health, which is a huge provider for healthcare in the United States, was not allowed to redevelop that unless there was, they helped fund $1.3 million worth of green infrastructure here. So this is not us. This was the mayor's office was putting screws on these guys saying, if you want to do anything here, you have to put green infrastructure both in your facility and on the streetscape. So the 1.3 million is just the money I get to help build this project. And then we receive 3 million from the state grants. Again, we love grabbing money. But the thing that we get for this is a great project that helps make this more livable. If you look at a lot of these intersections, it makes no sense. So a lot of what we're trying to do is reconfigure these slightly and make them make more urban sense, more walkable, greener, a lot less concrete. A lot of when you think of San Francisco as this progressive city, but a lot of it is very much just concrete and asphalt like you see here. So this is a great example of an area with a lot of fatalities. Why? Because Valencia Street goes straight shot all the way down, but then there's this split here of you can either go left or right. And everyone makes a lot of knee-jerk reactions, and people are trying to cross this weird little triangle. You have to cross Mission Street to get here. Then you have to stand here in the little island to wait for the light to change, and then cross this way. And you could guess how many people stand there for 30 seconds, waiting for the light to change. Everyone just runs across. So instead of this death trap, we're putting in a stormwater permeable plaza that's both a stormwater feature, but most importantly, a gathering space for the local residents. They don't have a gathering space right now. Right now, if they want to gather, they go to a bar. So this is actually something that's going to be wonderful for the community. And as much as PUC loves to throw parties on our own, we aren't legally allowed to do so on the ratepayers' dime. So we worked with the mayor's office to actually help them create their own business district and have them organize it so the local business members control the use of the plaza and actually help throw cultural events. And before this plaza is in place, working with them to get them up to speed of how do you organize this and how do you clean up and all the details. So this is an example of public-private partnership, which is going to be critical to minimizing the maintenance for us. Because if it gets trashed and have a bunch of homeless people in there, it doesn't work for anyone. All right, here we're going to go north to Wiggle Neighborhood Green Corridor. Gotta love the names. So the Wiggle is a famous bike, almost a freeway, where there's two hills on either side. This is a high point here and a high point here. And this is the gathering space for both people and water. Historically, this was the Hayes Creek alignment. And then it got all paved over. And cyclists love to go for the path of least resistance. And so they go flying down here, and they zigzag left, right, without stopping for traffic or pedestrians. And there's a lot of problems. So PUC partnered with MTA, the Municipal Transportation Authority, to come up with a combined project to help manage both stormwater and reduce potential risks of accidents. And so this is what it looks like. This is the stereotypical San Francisco street. Quite lovely. But if you notice, or maybe I should back up a sec. If you notice, this is actually quite of a blind corner. If you are standing right here, you can't see who's zooming down here. There's all these impediments. So people feel like they're taking their life in their hands if they try to cross the street. So what we're trying to do is create these bulb outs that extends it out about 8-10 feet into the street so that in the corner where you don't want to have cars parked anyways because of line of sight, now you have bioretention planters, otherwise known as rain gardens, on these corners, managing stormwater, creating beautification, softening how much hard edge there is in the corner, but also reducing risk of car accidents. All right, let's see. Here we are in Holloway in the southwest part of the city. The southwest part of the city is very, very different. If you look at this image up here, it's an underprivileged community, meaning they only make $75,000 a year. So it's something where this is the land of the lost. This is where you hardly see any projects. If you look at the sidewalk, it looks like a Frankenstein sidewalk because it's people basically doing work as needed when everything crumbles. So what we're trying to do is translate this into what we want to have as a model block of something that's more plug and play for having permeable parking spaces and then rain gardens on the low end of the corner of the block. So this is what it looks like currently, and this is what we're hoping to do. So this is something that is subtle. We're trying to tell people we're not completely revolutionizing their street. They'll still recognize it. It'll just be enhanced. So this is something that we've got a lot of support from the community. And then we have Visitation Valley Green Nodes. This is a project over 2 different areas. We have the Sunnydale Mini Plaza, which is adjacent to a church, a huge amount of concrete. And then there's Leland Avenue Rain Gardens, which is where a senior center has a community garden that interfaces with a park. And it's part of where the rec park department ignores, to put it nicely. This is the Leland Avenue Rain Garden. Plan view. Visitation Valley is this long, winding 2-mile road, and we're capturing the runoff from it in these terraced rain gardens. So this is currently what it looks like, where there's some raised beds and a whole bunch of chain link and some dying vegetation. And what we're hoping to do is put in some terraced rain gardens. We tried to work with public health to see if we could reuse some of that stormwater for irrigating the community garden and got shot down because of potential health concerns. We'll be working through that for the next project for all of the policy side of things. This is the Sunnydale Avenue Mini Plaza. So this is looking at what it looks like now. It's not very inviting, and this is where a huge amount of the community members come and gather. And this is what we're hoping to do with it, is actually add in seating, some vegetation. And again, this design was very much informed through the public outreach process. This is what the community was asking for. And so we're integrating green design with the community's needs. Sunset Boulevard, you could actually probably see it from space. It's a large boulevard that's got 4 lanes of traffic each way. It's huge. It spans most of the west side of the city. And actually people think, well, it's already green. What do you have to do there? Well, it's green in the sense that it's a whole bunch of turf grass and a lot of ornamental trees, and that's about it. And all of the runoff from the streets goes into the combined sewer system and runs off. And the landscape is perfect for allowing that stormwater to be infiltrated into the very sandy soils beneath. So this is going to be one of the most cost-effective projects, and one of the more subtle changes is we're hoping to add in some seating that has some educational interpretive signage, have a lot of rain gardens that add some color, but ultimately this is going to be more of an adaptation of the existing landscape. This is not major regrading, so basically it's some minor plumbing work. So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit in parts of the city that we're trying to use this as an example of how you can just integrate green without having to really change the area a lot. And we're also trying to integrate as many outdoor classrooms as possible and upgrade the streets for ADA requirements, the curb ramps, all the American Disability requirements. So Chinatown is one of the more politically driven projects. We had to sort of check certain boxes of making sure we hit certain types of communities and certain types of projects. And this is an alleyway in the project area, basically in the heart of Chinatown. This is behind all the shops where they normally dump all the unwanted refuse. Everyone is telling us we're crazy because the folks use this as the whole alley as a trash bin. And what we're trying to do is make everyone's back their front. So this is an area where there's some crime at night, there's a lot of debris, a lot of rats, and so what we're trying to do is clean this up, have shared use, have delivery trucks use it, and have stormwater in this area. So this is currently what it looks like. And no one, goes down here if they could help it, but you can see down at the end. What we're trying to do is clean it up, have more seating, and make this more pedestrian prioritized area. This is actually an example we've taken from a lot of other European cities who've done this quite a bit. And then we have Baker Beach Green Street. This is the most affluent area. This is where the late Robin Williams and Sharon Stone and Chris Isaac and whoever, you could name drop all day, but this is where the super rich are. And what we're trying to do is, in a super first world area, solve a third world problem of we have combined sewer discharge, raw sewage, going on to the head of Baker Beach, which is right here. This is a very used beach by the whole Bay Area. It's super famous because it's right next to Golden Gate Bridge. And we have this problem of stormwater coming from here and in this area that causes overflows to the system, and you could have a single project reduce those risks down to almost nothing. So this is currently what Lands End Trailhead looks like. So there's a lot of hesitation for the city to spend money in a super rich area because of public perception. So a lot of what we're trying to do is manage stormwater and enhance safety. So this is going to be a crosswalk, so you could actually get into Lands End Trailhead safely, have disabled persons parking, and manage stormwater. So a lot of green infrastructure is seen as solving the unsolvable problem, politically speaking, I mean, as well as hydraulically. But this is a corner. All these homes cost somewhere between $20 and $50 million. I mean, they're all crazy expensive, but this is a well-manicured area, and a lot of what we're trying to do is integrate green infrastructure into a lot of these vacant spaces. They have really wide, generous turns, and so there's a lot of room here to integrate green without having to really change the character of it. And it's also worth noting a lot of these folks have actually helped raise their own money to help build this project, which is unheard of. So we asked, you know, hey, could you raise 20,000? They said, why not 50? I'm like, okay, sure. So it's actually something that they're quite generous for specifically green infrastructure, and now looking to raise $200,000 for other green infrastructure projects. So at first they started wanting to sue us and stop the project because they usually want to stop every project. But we won them over through public outreach, so much so that they're funding us. So it's wonderful. Upper Yosemite Creek daylighting is probably one of the most controversial projects. It sounds like it should be the project that everyone loves and adores, but not everyone agrees on creek daylighting. Creek daylighting means you're taking a creek that historically was in the vicinity and then it was either put into pipes or buried, and then you're trying to bring them up into the daylight again. Why? Because you could actually help manage way more stormwater, add a lot of habitat, add a lot more walkability, usability for the whole area. But the thing that is, as a utility side, reducing the risk of discharge, this is managing 7.6 million gallons. Again, I apologize for the gallons, but it's a lot of water. And this is over about 3,000 feet, almost a mile. So this is part of McLaren Park. It's considered low-hanging fruit for us because we own almost all this property already. And there's a couple areas that are residential here that we have to sort of contend with. So this is adjacent to one of the soccer fields that what we're hoping to do is integrate in cross bridges and trails. We got a lot of pushback from both Rec Park and the community that did not want trails there because it was going to invite unwanted use, meaning people from outside of their neighborhood. So you could discount the trail there, but we're still doing the creek. And if people happen to create their own goat path walking along the creek, it's not our fault. All right, so looking at the schedule of the projects, most of our projects are in design now. There's a couple that are in construction, and it's actually something where we're hoping to streamline this process. The purpose of these projects is to demonstrate to the PUC Commission how easily these projects could be implemented, how desired are they by the public, and how much more of these should we be doing in the future. So that's why there's a lot of attention on these projects. These projects are worth $57 million. Sounds like a huge amount of money, but that's what you get for $57 million in San Francisco. So what we're looking to get authorization for in next spring is $400 million in addition, and we'll see how much more we get beyond that. This is the stats. This is how I convinced my boss that we should be doing these projects. Is the drainage management area is the total amount of runoff area that contributes flows to these green infrastructure projects. We're managing, and I apologize again for acres. I don't know offhand the acres to hectares, but 177.5 acres, managing 26 million gallons. Basically, the level service storm has to do with risk of flooding, helping to reduce the flows tremendously, and then by event, and then ultimately for 57 million. So a lot of folks have looked at the bottom line for green, and the thing I told them up front, and it's great to be honest, is this will cost more than your traditional projects. It will cost more. Mostly because you're solving more than just the water problem. You're solving some of the social, environmental problems in the areas. And so people have to look beyond just the cost from a utility standpoint and look at what problem are you trying to solve. Are you trying to make the city more livable, safer, more habitat friendly? So this is a great example of a program that has gotten a lot of support throughout the whole city. Really quickly, this is City Hall, super iconic. This is also, to check another box, which is we need to make sure the mayor sees this every time he looks out his back window. We're going to be integrating green infrastructure in a super formal French garden area that has looked good all the time. And this is going to be part of the Van Ness Corridor Transit Improvement Project, which is a mouthful. But this is part of what is Highway 101 through the city. So we have to meet not only the city requirements, but the state Caltrans requirements. So there's a lot of design by code. in this project. That's a lot of what we're trying to do, is push our way through the code to show that you could actually make this work through almost any kind of requirement. So this is a great example of meeting all the maintenance requirements, the political requirements, and regulatory requirements. We can make it happen. Stormwater management, what we're doing as part of the city is only half of all the green infrastructure going in, and actually the private side has more green infrastructure going in over time. We have the stormwater management ordinance, which requires people that have redevelopment of 5,000 square feet or larger, which is almost every single project, to integrate green infrastructure into their project to help manage stormwater. So it's a requirement. And we have over 208 projects right now, as we speak, that are over 40 stories. There's huge, huge amount of redevelopment. You can't walk a block without seeing a crane. So a lot of what we're trying to do is make the private sector help fund a lot of the vision for the future of San Francisco. So it used to be that some of these developers, like you see about like Barangaroo that we saw, wanted to integrate green. We had some of those one-off projects where they're like, okay, here's some green, here's some green. We said, okay, enough. We need green in every single major redevelopment project. So it's been accepted with some resistance at first, but now it's considered commonplace. All right, so thanks so much. This wouldn't be possible without the support from Matt Dillon and all Green Roof Australasia. This is really wonderful to be here, and want to thank my wife and baby back there too. This is for the next generation. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Raphael. Please join us for morning tea outside after we have just some questions. The exhibitors are out there. Please go and talk to them. Please talk to the speakers. I'd like to thank Mark Paul from the Greenwall Company to doing this beautiful Greenwall display, the green roof pillows. And you can talk to Mark about that. You here, Mark? Yes? No, you must be outside. Questions? Rebecca is the microphone. Rebecca has a microphone.
Hi, my name's Ben Slay. I'm from Sydney University. I was wondering, Raphael, how you were proposing to, or if you were proposing to kind of measure the success of these projects so that you can then show the skeptical and budget-conscious people who control the purse strings, the value that you've added.
Sure, I could say, first off, there's different measures of success. We're monitoring hydraulically how they perform over time. And in America, there's a lot of skepticism over a lot of research that is out there. I've noticed this not just in the city of San Francisco, but Los Angeles, all over the US really, is people don't trust other cities' conditions reflecting their city. So we've had to replicate every major study that has ever been done from City New York or Germany or whoever has done the study. People are like, yeah, that was there. We had examples, wonderful examples in Portland. They're like, that's Portland, this is San Francisco. So we've had a lot of support because no one trusts the data out there to actually confirm the performance of green. And it's actually been great because it's part of the scientific process to see what is variability of performance in design. There's probably more similarities between Sydney and San Francisco, Portland and San Francisco, given the soil types, climate, rainfall, and all that. So we're going to have more data about how to design green infrastructure for Mediterranean climates because of all this. In terms of performance for the community, we have a lot of ongoing public outreach to find out how people are impacted right now through construction, and then later on how they find the resulting project to benefit their community. So, yeah, does that answer your question?
I was sort of wondering what sort of things you're going to measure. I'm planning a project at the moment that's sort of looking at integrated design. One of the challenges is demonstrating the value of that integration.
Well, I would say, as some people are mentioning life cycle cost analysis, a lot of what we're doing initially is to evaluate the performance of it hydraulically, looking at the peak flow attenuation, the infiltration rates, those kind of statistics of looking at how it performs hydraulically. We have, V-notched weirs and piezometers. I could talk to you later, details. But we're not monitoring water quality currently, mostly because the focus is on volume, because this gets combined with raw. And so the raw sewage with stormwater makes people not worry as much about the water quality. But we are monitoring the plant suitability and the maintenance requirements over time. And we're also trying to get as much public ownership of stewardship of the area, but specifically PUC will be on the hook for maintaining all these green infrastructure assets. And it actually took a huge amount of effort, not just myself, but a lot of other people at PUC to say this is the same thing as a pump station, a water treatment plant, or a sewer pipe. These are wastewater infrastructure assets. So just because they're plants doesn't mean that we don't have to maintain it. Don't try to shove it off to someone else because it won't be taken care of. And if it's not maintained, it won't work. So we have several $1 million for in the annual budget for maintenance, which is wonderful.
And what about the public, so the community, so you're creating a community square, so that sort of protection, the public community?
Yeah, so the public amenity side of things is the asset's only as useful as the community uses it, as they define it. We've been doing a huge amount of, we're helping, the city's helping organize the community. Usually it's the other way around, that they organize to get angry at us about something. And what we're trying to do is help them get organized to be happy about something. Usually to be happy takes some other level of organization because everyone's busy all the time. So we're trying to say, hey, this will be a huge benefit for everyone. They've all agreed. They now have an actual legal association and can actually organize. We help give them examples of other community groups that have organized or cultural events, displays of art, and so it's we're trying to be proactive in getting the community to get outside. Yeah, good question.
More questions? Yeah. Hi. Yeah, I have a question for Manfred. I'm interested in the performance of green walls, green roofs, in terms of climate. Whether there's in cold climate, is there a sort of a limit in climate to when it becomes the costs of replacement outweigh benefits? How far north can you go?
How far north is a good question. Okay, my situation is in northeast Germany with very cold winter. So, okay, we have the map with hardness of plants all over Europe, and what is suitable in our climate, maybe in Warsaw, a little bit, Scandinavia, okay. And but for nearly each climate, we can found some solutions. Yeah, this is the point. So there's also a group working in Finland with living walls and green roofs just now. So it's possible. Yeah, but if you take climbers in Moscow, for example, there are some limits with the frost in the boxes for finally. Yeah, and it must be tested. But this is really the point. It looks not all the time beautiful like in spring. But it's possible. For each climate, they have a few plants. This is the real answer.
It'll come on? Yeah. Which is more resilient, green roofs or green walls?
Okay, as I learned here in Australia, they said, as I was here 2010 or 8, both trips, they said, oh, living walls are so simple. In our climate, I would say we have the experience that the green roofs, extensive roofs, are very simple. Okay, you must look for some technical requirements, but green roofs in our climate is not too difficult. the living walls with all the technology behind, with the pump, with the micro valves, and so it's first an investment. But it's interesting to see a curve. If you have only 1 square meter living wall somewhere in our climate, you need all the technical features. If you have 1,000 square meters, the costs go rapidly down. So make a big wall green, then you can reduce the cost. Good for all the companies finding this message.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We'll have to, and sorry, Tony, one more question. No, go.
I guess I have a question for Scott. What role does the federal parliament have in setting the agenda for sustainable cities in this country? Is it possible for the federal parliament to do that, or is it really reliant on state politicians?
I think we've taken a giant step backwards, to be honest. In the last parliament, we did have a major cities unit. We had CRCs around the country, the cooperative research centres, like water, a lot of expertise at a Commonwealth level, whether it be through CSIRO, the CRCs, individual universities, or in the Commonwealth Public Service, has been washed out the door. Like, there's a major attack underway on research, science, innovation, and anything at all. Anybody with the word business, with the word climate on their business card is being washed out of the public service at the moment. So I think the Commonwealth's got a strong role to play, not least because the Commonwealth's got most of the taxing powers. We should be funding it. The Commonwealth government should be funding innovative projects in the same way as the San Francisco, you're leveraging federal funding presumably for a lot of this work. That's what we should be doing here in Australia, but we've just taken a big step backwards. I'm amazed, at the degree of sophistication of some of the stuff that we've seen this morning, how there's so little system-wide thinking of that scale going on here in Australia. So yes, the feds have a strong role to play, and at the moment they're not playing it.